So the talent and the learning communities are huge drivers and strategists behind helping to support the culture that an organization has and the culture an organization aspires to. And when working together properly, it's less siloed, more integrated, and I think it's felt by every single individual in an organization when those things are aligned.
So welcome everyone. I am delighted to be joined today by three great patrons of iVentiv, ahead of iVentiv's Learning Futures Seattle session. I'm delighted to be joined by Brian Murphy, who, as well as being a member of the iVentiv Advisory Board, is Senior Director of Employee Skilling for Microsoft and previously had roles with Citi and with AstraZeneca. I'm also delighted to be joined by our hosts for the Seattle session, Liz and Manasi from Expedia. Liz is VP of Global Talent Management with previous roles at AstraZeneca also and Estee Lauder companies. And Manasi has a career from Capgemini and McKinsey and is now Senior Director of Talent and Learning with Expedia Group, who will be hosting the session on the 27th and 28th of August. And so it's great to have you all here. Thank you for your time, for a connection ahead of the event. And really, I wanted to have a chance to bring you all together, talk about some of the topics that will be coming up on the 2 days of the events in August, start to surface some of those conversations, and really pick your brains on learning, talent, and AI at Microsoft, Expedia, and as you see it, really as members of the global learning and talent community. And one thing that I'm really curious to understand is, both working in it from Expedia and Microsoft now, is really the perspective from a tech company as opposed to previous careers in pharma, consulting or finance. How are you using new technologies as tech companies to make learning, talent and business objectives or achieve those? Manasi, perhaps I can come to you first on that one.
Thank you, Hannah. And it's a fascinating question, right? One that we grapple with every day. I thought before just thinking through, what are some of the things that we do, it would be good to reflect on what are some of the problem statements that make this so specific for the technology industry. And there's a few that I can think of off the top of my head. The first one is that, the space of technology is in a constant state of disruption. There's new things coming out every day. We are learning new things. We are facing new problems. We're solving for new use cases and new audience. And so there's this state of constant disruption. The second thing that you observe is that the speed at which this domain moves, right? Because the disruption, there's things that are new every day. And so speed is also a unique problem. The third thing is that these teams usually work in large, global, dispersed, hybrid, virtual, so many different kind of models. And again, as you think of skills, you're thinking of how do you support these teams to work well together. And I think there's a last one that, often I think gets missed. But that last one that I wanted to call out was that as you think of building skills for the technology industry or technologists, these skills often get applied differently depending on the domain or the business context that these technologists are working in. And so I thought of these 4 problem statements to kind of frame why is it different to solve for, skills in the context of technology as opposed to other industries. And so maybe just 3 thoughts to come back to what are the specific things that we think about when we solve for skills in this domain. The first thing is, as we think about leveraging tech to solve for technologists, the first thing that we think about is technology is actually a boon as we think about solving for technologists. And one of the biggest changes that we are all working through is what generative AI means for the future of learning and means for the future of technology. And I think it's really, really helping accelerate, how we have done learning and how we have delivered it. It's also making it more personalized in terms of, applications like real-time coaching and, helping people craft personalized learning plans, for example. And I think it's also helping learners in real time adjust their learning plans and recommendations, which is a huge boon for the learners. And so I think disruption in the generative AI space is helping learning teams, but it's also helping learners to evolve their learning experience. The second thing is how do we leverage technology for speed and pace, because often we deal with an industry that's developing very rapidly. And so how do you bring learning very quickly? And some of the things that happen are, one, like buying or build or buy. We often face this question. So how do we buy off the shelf for generic skills so that we are able to personalize and adapt for some of the industry specific skills? So that's another way technology helps, is having access to those off the shelf components that you're able to use. And I'll call out a third thing, and the third thing is learning ops. The fact that technology is becoming sharper and quicker and more intuitive means that it's also adding to or increasing operational efficiencies. So something that took maybe 2 days is now much quicker. It's also more intuitive in terms of data and the insights that it provides us. And so that's the third area where we are really leveraging technology to get deeper into what insights can technology provide us. So we as learning professionals are becoming, more helpful as well as more impactful in terms of the learning programs that we deliver. So that was a little bit of a long way to your original question about, what are you doing as learning teams to develop expertise quickly? But I thought it was important to frame the problem before actually jumping into what are we doing. The context is important.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Manasi, I love what you said in the first use case about Gen AI and how we're using it from a learning perspective. And if I think about how we're using it in the talent space specific to performance management, the question I'm hearing regularly as we're going through a mid-year cycle is, how can I use AI to help me with the feedback I need to give to my employees? How can I craft it in a way that it is well written and as clear as possible? Because we know simplicity and transparency are hugely important to making sure that people know where they need to grow, what their opportunities are, what they need to continue to do well, so that we can deliver our business outcomes. And one of the topics that we're talking about right now is really the utilization of something like Copilot in helping to prepare for the performance management cycle and some of the conversations that need to happen. What's the appropriate use of something like Copilot for us to be able to help managers and support them, but make sure that it's not generic, that it really is customized and focused on each individual, because that's where the importance of the individual and the human in this process is really, really key. So I thought I would serve that up because it's something that we're actively talking about right now and partnering with our security teams and our operation teams to make sure that it aligns with our overall Expedia Group approach and what we're supporting organizationally, and also how are we helping to give managers the coaching and the guidance so that they can utilize it in the most effective way, so we are efficient but also really impactful and super focused on the individual.
I was going to say, Liz, the check is in the post for calling out Copilot, Microsoft Copilot. So thank you for that. Yeah, just to build, I guess, on what Liz and Manasi were talking about. First of all, I think the question is such an interesting one around technology industries versus others. I agree. I think the industry that we're lucky enough to live in and work in right now is incredibly dynamic. But I think all when we talk about our customers, I'm on the selling side, the sales side of Microsoft, and all of our customers are technology companies. That's how we see it, and I think they're all being disrupted by what's happening, particularly with AI. So from a learning perspective, you could apply the same sort of generality around it. I would echo a lot of what Manasi talked about around this personalization. I think L&D is going to be dragged kicking and screaming into the 21st century with this advent of generative AI, which is about overdue. Things like using AI for curated content and radical personalization is about time. But also, if you look at the recent announcements by Khan Academy and the partnership they're doing with us, but also Salman Khan talking to his using ChatGPT-4 to tutor his son on math. It just starts to show you the power of this tool and this technology using AI as personal tutor and coach. So corporate L&D functions are going to get really disintermediated pretty quick if they don't revisit their value prop and why they exist and where they can add value, and embracing this technology not just for their own use, but also skilling folks on AI tools and systems. I think is going to be key. And I also wonder whether we're going to have learning technology. Learning technology has been a segment, and we've all done major investments in different learning tech stack. But I wonder in the future, we're just going to have great work and performance technology that's going to incorporate great learning and talent management techniques. So, that's something for us to ponder and think about, rather than hanging on to the segment that we own, really embracing collaborative technology like Copilot, like the different tools that we use to work and drive performance. Effectively, they're the best tools to embed and embrace learning. So, yeah, it's a great question to kick us off, Hannah.
Thank you all. I mean, I'd say it's a really interesting one, and I particularly love the context of being in the tech space as well. And I'd be curious, maybe speak a little bit to what you mentioned, Manasi, about how do you develop expertise quickly at the pace of change that's happening? And from your side, Brian, being on that seller side, so being almost in a position of expertise and trying to educate others when it's such a booming industry and things are changing so fast. How do you develop that expertise quickly and efficiently? I'd be curious to know a little bit about that, perhaps, Brian.
Yeah, sure. This concept of speed, I think, has been dominant and prevalent in the learning space for a number of years now. Where whether it be the half-life of skills and a store of knowledge being reducing with the age of digitalization and so on. But I think that with AI, the topic that Liz and Manasi have brought up this really is a game changer, because I think the need for to keep up is relentless, and therefore the need for L&D to keep up is relentless. And I think the traditional approaches that corporate L&D have tended to take is not sustainable. Waiting for the formal intervention, purely waiting for a formal training intervention to be developed, to be research developed, design development and deployed is just not going to cut it, right? So I think that but with Copilot, and with technologies such as Copilot, this is also different. This isn't just helping people to learn a new skill or a new tool. It's actually a whole new way of working. So for our sellers, for example, as customer zero at Microsoft, this is critical that we help our sellers not just learn a skill, but actually develop a whole new orientation around using AI. And that's a lot of pressure, but that's the best way that we can equip and help our sellers deploy something which is fundamentally new to our customers, so radically new, and requires our customers and our partners to rethink how they work. So that's what we're focusing on, is helping our sellers be customer zero for Microsoft in that regard, because it's the best way to showcase how you can use it to transform your business, or how you serve your customers or your operations, and Manasi has talked about, or indeed our sales motion. So how we use Copilot to support how we run our sales motions, and that's something we're using with our customers to help with their sales folks. So I think in both of these things, speed is key, and the traditional approaches, courses alone won't cut it. So communities of practice is something that many progressive L&D leaders and CLOs have been using for a long time, because what that does is it allows you to bring experts together who are really at the bleeding edge of transformational technology to work and learn real time in communities of practice. That's something which we harness greatly at Microsoft, as well as then harnessing experimental learning. So as this is a whole new way of working, not just learning a skill in isolation, really embracing experiential learning. So development challenges, helping people build habits. That's something that we're really seeing with Copilot is fundamental as well. So social learning, communities of practice, and experiment challenges, not necessarily new, but these are now becoming much more important, because the traditional approach just doesn't give you the speed or agility that you need, and that requires traditional learning teams to really let go and empower people to learn at their own pace in a ways that makes most sense for them. So yeah, that just a few of the things that we're seeing on our side.
Brian, you said something that's really compelling to me, and I'm thinking about, it's not necessarily the technology supports, but it's the way of working of talent and learning practitioners and experts. It's the constant scanning of the environment. It's understanding the strategy. It's being on the edge of where we think we might be going so that we can anticipate what skills we might be needing so that we can build them, knowing that they may or may not come to fruition because of the strategy. But it's the rate with which we have to do those things and always be on with our sort of antennae up and scanning the environment to make sure that we aren't behind, but we're actually a little bit ahead of, so that we can make sure that we are setting the organization up just in case, or as things are happening, we're doing that live. So it's sort of if I take the way that you build tech, right? You get your first rev out there and then you iterate and then you go again and then you iterate some more. So how do we apply that to our talent and our learning systems so that we can continue to walk alongside the business and where we can a little bit ahead, so that we're equipping people with the right skills and experiences to take the organization and strategy where we need it to go. So I love that point that you made. I think it's really relevant. How do you have the way of working that's then coupled with the technology to make it all happen?
Love what Liz is saying. And Liz, I think I'm going to, kind of double down on the rev and the iterate point, because this is one of the ways that we bring learning to life on cutting edge technologies is, going for the depth and the breadth and balancing them out so that we're able to pull a holistic portfolio out there. The best, a good example of this would be when you have a new technology in the market, for example, that first, you're able to introduce the basic principles or the guiding principles to a large audience so that everyone understands the power of the technology or what it can do for you. And then you're starting to build the depth so that you can understand, you as a user, or, like someone who's implementing the technology can understand how you need to work with it to deliver something. And then we go into another layer of depth, for example, to start to shape those experts who then going on to, become more facilitators or give us more skills. So balancing depth and breadth is a great way to think about how you bring pace to upskill the whole organization and then specialize. I'll just close off adding one point, which is what Brian was talking about, communities of practice. And we've seen that in terms of pace and, speed to upskilling, our subject matter experts have been a very critical component of that strategy, because our subject matter experts are key in helping us scale and drive out some of that expertise quickly to our communities of practice. And so that's another element that we think of in terms of establishing that whole strategy to upskill the whole organization in order to pivot to whatever is changing and disrupting the technology space.
I love what your definition of communities and social learning, Manasi, because some L&D folks think of it as a sort of a bolt-on to a formal program. Like, oh, well, somebody went through a program, we're going to do some cohort-based, learning and sharing, and that's great and that's important. I think what you're talking about, which is also what I was talking about, was how do we harness the collective knowledge and the tacit knowledge in the org? Mightn't even be documented yet, because these things are so nascent and so emergent. And how do we help scaffold and support those connections so the sparks fly, and develop maybe the social learning skills so that people, high performing people are really good at this, right? They build their networks and they contribute and take from their networks and all that good stuff. So I love the fact that you're seeing this in a sort of a network play, rather than maybe at times L&D we can get a little bit narrow in our perspective of like, well, it'll be a bolt-on community to a program. I think that's missing the point. So yeah, just wanted to say I totally agree with what you were saying on there.
Yeah, well, perhaps as a build to that, and maybe Liz, I can come to you on this, is in the spirit of communities and teams and working together. How do you see talent and learning, or what are the new opportunities to make talent and learning work together, especially when you're going through such transformation as we're seeing in businesses today, and both the individual roles that those functions take, but how they can really collaborate on that?
I think it's an interesting question, Hannah, because we are all part of a human resources team or a people team as it is, but making sure that we're working in an integrated way is really valuable. And so when I think about, well, interestingly, someone once said to me that learning follows talent. And I think, well, that's one way to think about it. I also think that talent also follows strategic workforce planning. So if you've got the trifecta of strategic workforce planning that's happening and really robust in an organization where you know the skills that you have and the skills that you need, and you know your succession planning in your pipelines, what are the skills gaps that our leaders who are on our pipelines have, then your learning strategy can help support all of that by building the skill for all, and then the skill that's needed specific to your pipeline candidates. And those three strategies, when they work together, hand in glove, if you will, walking side by side, I think that's where you have really good outcomes with integrated strategies, but also strategies that sit separate and are supporting different areas or segments within an organization. And that's just one way that I see sort of talent and learning needing to work together. And the second piece is also around driving culture. So the talent and the learning communities are huge drivers and strategists behind helping to support the culture that an organization has and the culture an organization aspires to. And when working together properly, it's less siloed, more integrated. And I think it's felt by every single individual in an organization when those things are aligned. Manasi, Brian, what would you add or build to what I've just shared or react
No,
to?
I mean, unsurprisingly, I see this very similarly to you. I mean, you and I, when we worked together at AstraZeneca, you led talent and I led learning teams, and we saw. I think we saw this as two ends of the same spectrum, right? So if ultimately we're shooting for business performance, then look at the conditions that's required of that. I completely agree with you. It starts really good strategic workforce planning, but also what are the conditions that needed for people to be at their best, right? You have to have the right culture, the right org design, we have the right exec and manager capabilities, and of course the skills as a unifier. I think that's where you and I really saw the two strategies overlapping, where it was like, how can we use skills as the red thread to drive organizational growth, but also individual growth, and then career as the wrapper. So yeah, I mean, I've struggled to kind of pull these apart too much, as they're so fundamentally connected. And then some of the unifiers that Liz mentions around culture and so on, as well as the skills piece. I think all of a sudden you're starting to break down the traditional silos. You're starting to look at value chain of skills, whether it be from an employee perspective or the org's perspective, and then it all sort of starts to come together. So yeah, but ultimately maybe talent does lead learning. Maybe I'll put it like that. Maybe there's always a bit of rivalry between the two, but we'll leave it at that. Yeah. Anyway, Manasi, you're gonna pick it up for learning, I'm hoping, right?
Absolutely. And I'm going to start off by saying that, when you have good partners on the other side to work with, it doesn't matter who leads who. At the end of the day, I think, both teams are in service of two big ultimate goals, if you will. One is helping the organization succeed, and the other one is helping the employee grow, right? And then we all aspire to make that happen. Why does that not happen sometimes? I think I've asked myself that question a few times, and I think it's easy, one, to get lost in our little silos, as we call ourselves talent, as we call ourselves learning. It's always easy to think of what does success for this mean, or what does success for this mean, whereas your success is actually the bigger success of the organization. I thought we had two really good examples, and Liz is my, I don't like partner in crime, partner in impact. And so Liz, please add. But I think there are two really good examples from our world that could be relevant here. One is Liz and I earlier this year made an effort to say, as we serve Expedia, how do we make sure that we represent ourselves as one team to our business leaders, and make sure that we are in service of the same goals? And so we collaborated to build joint talent and learning roadmaps that really talk to the same goals, the same impact story, and how kind of this spectrum comes together to say it's one comprehensive solution that delivers, certain success for you. I think the other thing where I think we partnered successfully to bring these two worlds together is functional communities. And I know we spoke about communities of practice earlier, so it's nice to see it come back up in another context. And as we thought about functional communities and the value of expertise, the value of networks that these functional communities bring to the organization and across the organization, what we did was to think through how does developing good talent translate into learning impact and, building the right skills or delivering the right programs? And how do we make sure that if we do learning right, that talent succeeds? And as we look to grow our talent, that we make sure that, those inputs flow back into learning. And I think that so the functional communities have also been a great example of how we brought the two worlds together to again make sure that talent and learning were working together and working together well for the benefit of the business. Liz, anything to add?
I don't have anything to add. It was well said. And I thought it was two really good examples of how we've partnered together to drive opportunity across talent and learning from a divisional perspective, and then at the macro level, organization wide.
Thank you. I also really liked what you mentioned about culture and being there's what culture is and what culture aspires to be, and how much that is a driver both of individual experiences and the organization as a whole. And Brian, I understand you're working with some early career talent at the moment quite closely. What would you say is the opportunity there if you were a young professional starting out in the tech space in a world that is changing, with joining organizations that legacy goes before them? What is their opportunity to impact, or are they molding to the culture, or what are you seeing from early career talent, and then perhaps from Expedia early career talent as well?
Yeah, I'm happy to kick this piece off. I mean, I was really excited when I was asked to take on the early in profession, we call it early in career, talent cohort last year, and how we support their onboarding and their continuous development. Because if you think about it, this generation are going to be the first generation coming into the workforce who will only know how to work with Copilot and generative AI. And so we have an amazing opportunity to really learn a lot from them, and to run be really experimental with how we not just support their development and learn how they learn and how they adapt, but also really think through use it as an accelerator to rethink how work is designed. And this is, this puts L&D into a non-traditional sort of L&D space where we're saying, hey, we are going to develop an onboarding program, a multi-year development program for this talent, but we really need you to rethink and continue to question the type of work and the tasks that are going to be needed to be completed. Because if we train folks on the current state, by the time they're through that, then work is going to change. We've missed a huge opportunity. So that's what we're doing at the moment, really experimenting with the business around starting to break the work down to the task level, think forward and think about what's going to be completed using AI, and what are the skills and capabilities that we need to support for these folks coming in, and how will they act as a bellwether for the rest of the organization. So I think it's actually a really exciting area to focus on. It's not easy. I mean, we have to kind of figure it out as we go. But actually, this is what our early in career talent expect. They want to join these organizations, these amazing dynamic organizations, to be at that forefront. So the worst thing you can do is to sort of roll out the sort of the traditional approach. And that's not easy for a sales organization like the part of Microsoft that I work in. It's very cyclical, it's very fiscal year based, and yet we know we need to change the work as we're doing it. And I think the early in profession segment and space gives us the best opportunity to help the business slow down to speed up in that regard. So folks coming in are the last thing I would say on this is, organizational purpose is always important, but it's fundamentally critical for this generation of folks coming into the workforce. So, leading with purpose and being really and living your values and the organizational culture that you espouse, really bringing that to life. There's no passes on that, and rightly so with this generation. And so I'm pleased that we have all the culture work that we've done as an organization over the last 8-9 years around growth mindset as the foundation for that is I think serving us well, and particularly serving us well with this group of folks coming in.
And Liz, Manasi, I know Expedia are also a very purpose-driven and value-driven organization. Is that something you're seeing in early career as they're coming into the organization?
I'm going to take us back in time to 20 or so years ago when I was an early in career, almost graduating from college. And I remember vividly being in a class when someone said, "We are preparing you for jobs that don't exist today. We don't know what they are, but they're going to be different in the future." And there was also all of this other noise that was all the things that you're learning today may or may not be useful in the future, but we're going to prepare you for them because you'll need to be able to move into an organization and be able to, start working as a professional. And so I'm reflecting on what Brian was saying is it's exactly that. There's so much listening that we know what we know about being a professional in the environment, about working in our organizations, about understanding our culture. And I think what's so important for us as there are early in career individuals coming in, or really anyone, to be honest, we need to be listening because people are going to come with their own experiences, their own lenses. They're going to come with some level of proficiency in technology that we won't know about or we won't know as well. What we do know is what we can anchor to. And if we make sure that we remain open and that we are listening, I think you can get to really good outcomes. But without those two working together, I think there's such a missed opportunity. So, right on, Brian, what you said about the, engage people and helping to figure it out together and sort things out as you go, knowing that there's going to be a level of ambiguity along the way. And that's actually okay because everybody is doing that regardless of what level you're operating in ambiguity on a regular basis. And you're sort of testing and learning as you go. So I think it applies to all levels in an organization, and particularly to those who are early in career, because they're bringing in a skill set and a knowledge base that we don't really have and that we need in order to move ourselves forward organizationally.
So I think I'll wrap up by saying Expedia's early career learning program has 3 tenets: culture, capabilities, and community. And Liz and Brian have so effectively touched on all 3 of them that I have nothing to add, except just reiterating that, we've seen that these 3 tenets really build a foundation for a good and successful future in an organization.
And then, so perhaps if we look at the other end of the spectrum of that, so people in senior leadership roles and how the world is changing for them, what do you think leaders of the future will need, or how will they need to change and adapt to lead effectively in a world that is transformative, that is being disruptive, that it will have AI as a co-pilot where it hasn't before, and what will that change about leadership, both as leadership development and also the leaders that you see today? Perhaps Brian, I can come to you on that one.
I'm probably about to contradict myself, so you can tell me if this is helpful or not. But I get to ask this a lot. It tends to be a regular question, which is, what are the keys for great leadership in the age of AI, or generative AI, I should say. And I for the most part, when I get out of bed in the morning, I think that actually the characteristics of great leadership will continue to be the characteristics of great leadership. In that regard, nothing changes. But I think what is changing is the necessity and the need for leaders to be great leaders. Because I think in the past, as work has been, there's a lot of drudgery and has been a lot of drudgery in work. And I think this is the great promise of generative AI. It will really free us up to lean into what makes us human and to play to our strengths as humans. And I think great leaders have always known that. Great leaders have always said, that's really human-centric leadership, right? Let's really pay attention to what's going on for people so we can set them up for success. And once people feel secure and they feel supported, empowered, then good things will happen. So I think in one way, I think the ability of bad leaders to kind of compensate for that by other means is becoming less and less. I think we focus a lot on adaptive leadership at Microsoft. I'm sure you do as well at Expedia and many other companies. And if you think about how we think about adaptive leadership, is there's 4 A's: is anticipation, so predicting future needs and trends, right? So that's going to just become more and more important. Articulation, for bringing collective understanding and support for action. Bringing clarity and helping leaders bringing clarity in this time of such fundamental change is such a superpower. The third one is adaptation, so continuous learning and being willing to change your mind Brad Smith, our president of Microsoft, he said, "No one ever died of humility." And this isn't a traditional corporate leadership trait, right? But it is a great leaders, the greatest leaders have always embraced that, and I think in future they will. And accountability, so ensuring transparency and responsibility in decision making. So these anticipation, articulation, adaptation, accountability will continue to be increasingly important. And we bring that to life at Microsoft through our 3 leadership principles, which, all leaders, including myself, at the end of the year, we succeed or fail on whether we've done these 3 things, which is create clarity, generate energy, and deliver success. And it's all based on these principles of adaptive leadership. And so, yeah, I'll finish by where I started. I'm pretty sure that what makes great leaders will continue to be those. I think it's just a case of we just have to dial those up even more, and I think that will become less and less, out of choice, more and more out of necessity. But I'm delighted if Manasi and Liz I'm going to listen carefully to what they got to say, because this one is an interesting one.
I can go. So, Brian, what you said was, it was so powerful that I'm still trying to kind of take it in, because it sort of outlines everything that we need to think about. But maybe just 2 thoughts from me, right? A few years ago, I read a quote and I haven't been able to find out or attribute it back to the author. So if you know it, please tell me. But I read a quote which kind of stuck with me, which is, the next frontier for leaders is at the edge of emotional intelligence and artificial intelligence. We know that boundary is always going to move. And so as a leader, you're always finding what the right balance is to, make the best of both sides. And I think, with that in mind, like, this has never been more true than today. When I think of leaders succeeding or operating in the world of AI, there's probably 3 things that I can think about that become critical. One is, as an individual, the ability to embrace change, flexibility, and to adapt is critical, because, in a few years ago, maybe we said that, you don't know what the next 18 months will bring, or you don't know what the next 2 years will bring. And then today we are asking the question, what will tomorrow bring, literally. And so embracing change, flexibility, adaptability is key. That's the first one. I think the thinking of inclusivity and emotional quotient becomes extremely important, especially in the world of AI. The ability to, recognize bias, protect privacy, some of these things become critical. And as an individual or a human being with emotional IQ, the ability to detect it, separate from AI, is just extremely important. And I think there's one thing that doesn't change. And the thing that doesn't change is the strategy and business acumen piece. So, as you bring these new strengths to the table, the ability to think strategically as a leader, create that clarity, for example, generate energy, and then to know the context of your business and operate successfully. And that is something that doesn't change. So I think there are 3 things that, kind of outline the answer to this question for me. One is the ability to embrace change. The second one is inclusivity and emotional quotient. And then the third one is that strategy and business acumen piece.
Well, I really love what you both said, and I'm struggling to find something to add to this conversation. But there's one thing that I can come up with, which I think will continue to be really important, and that is remaining curious and asking good questions, right? So as leaders, we can't know everything, and we have the benefit of being able to tap into AI and the technology that's available. And so remaining open and being curious and asking really good questions to get under the real situation. What's the driver? What's the route? And where do we need to go? I think that's going to, I don't think it's something new. I think it's something that leaders are going to continue as a way of working to embrace, making sure that we are always curious. Otherwise you become closed-minded. And I think there's lots of opportunities that can be missed. So if I turn that around, remaining open so that you don't miss opportunities and you can take organizations, to places of, incredible places through your teams. Because as leaders, we have to drive the organization. We have to listen to the organization, and we have to take decisions and be very clear about that. I think curiosity is one mechanism that if every leader embraced, all of us would do better for our organizations.
I totally agree with you on the curiosity piece. The other angle to that, Liz, is that I think, and this links to the previous our topic that we talked about our early in career. I think I think that's what folks will expect of leaders as well, increasingly, rather than having all the answers. Like, are they innately curious and are they creating that? Particularly when it comes to AI, are they really rethinking the fundamentals of work in this new paradigm and really leaning into what you said, Manasi, about the emotional intelligence? Are they really thinking about the human side of work? Because that's going to become the most important. That's where the competitive advantage will increasingly lie. Maybe not now as it, but once this thing normalizes out, everybody's going to be leveraging AI, and so I think great leaders attract great talent, and I think in order to attract great talent, leaders are going to have to embrace curiosity, as you say, Liz, and really lean into the emotional intelligence of the teams and what makes people tick. So I think it's really cool. I mean, it's basically all of the things that we've always been focusing on, really wanted to accelerate, but the conditions haven't necessarily driven it to the surface. I think we're going to increasingly see that happen, and pretty quickly.
Brian, you mentioned a quote by one leader at Microsoft about humility, but another one that we used, we actually use it to open every iVentiv session from Satya Nadella, is don't be a know-it-all, be a learn-it-all. And that's what I think we really try and embrace is, you can come from a point of expertise and know what you know, but you need to be open to, learning something from early in career and being on the precipice or a new frontier, Manasi, as you say, where things are changing. And hopefully we can maybe help you with finding the provenance of that quote, if it's in the comments, or if this is shared, if anyone can find it, because I also I really enjoy it. Perhaps just as a closing question, and we've touched on quite a few things here, across AI and the role of leaders and talent, and a bit of a fun question. What do you see, or how do you discern between what might be a fad in tech and what's here to stay? And now that can be both personally or in being in the tech space. But yeah, just as an open question.
It's a great question, isn't it? I'll start maybe, if it's okay, and I'll start just with the learning tech space. As I said earlier on, I think this is being radically transformed right now. And I think there's many fads, and has been many fads, and will continue to be in the L&D industry. But I think a lot of them are going to get disintermediated pretty quickly by Copilot, and by Copilots and AI assistants can really give people what they need and when they need it, and be incredibly personalized. And at the point of need. So whether it be personal tutors or personal practice engines, I think that unless it's based on some of those fundamentals, I think people will just move past it, and I think as people get better at using these new technologies themselves, they'll just use it when they need it and how they need it. And it's going to get that sophisticated pretty quickly. And so I think it'll get easier to spot the fads as a result. And so that's it. But more in the learning tech space, I think more broadly, Manashi's probably a better place for me to talk to this. But I think, again, we'll have to, it'll be interesting from a generational perspective around some of us on this call, a bit older, and I guess we've lived through enough life experiences to breed certain level of critical thinking around what's right and what isn't right, and really understand where the source information is coming from, and really not take everything at sort of face value. We got that years ago by reading newspapers, right? And so it's sort of we have built that muscle. I think the newer generation, they bring a lot of amazing capabilities that we don't, but then perhaps they'll have to learn some of that. So how the ethics of AI and how it's used and how it's built and how it's leveraged is something that is fundamentally important at Microsoft. But I think it's going to be a key capability and a key orientation that we're going to have to stay anchored to as this technology accelerates, and it's accelerating hugely. So yeah, that'll be some of the things that come to mind as you pose the question, Hannah.
I think it's great point. They're great points, Brian. I think about in many instances, you look to the past to predict the future, right? And I think that's how, I mean, you do forecasting that way, but you do a lot of things that way. And so when you apply that principle here, and then you also think about the speed with which technology is advancing, there's something about just staying close, having your finger on the pulse of how are people feeling when they use this type of experience or modality, whatever that might be. And that then becomes the trend. And whether that trend continues or it falls off is your indicator about whether that's going to be a fad or it's actually something that people find really useful. It helps them to grow, to build the scale or the capability, and then carry on being able to deliver, the business outcomes. And so I think it's a little bit of the how do you look back to look forward, and how do you look at the right now to be able to know where you need to go, and then also maybe take a couple of bets on where we think we might go based on those two trends. That is, maybe 3 ways to be thinking about, what will stay, and then where are people actually finding there's a lot of value, they rate it highly, and therefore need to put some more effort and some resource behind it.
So on a lighter note, I'm going to take inspiration from my 14-year-old and 9-year-old to answer this question because, I've realized that one person's fad may be the other person's essential need. Like they bring in these words from school where I'm going, are you crazy to be saying this at home? But apparently that's essential lingo at school. I'm like, okay, well, like use them appropriately. That's all I ask for. And as I think of transformative tech, it's and to distinguish them from the fads, I think the perspective that I bring to the table is that as someone who's part of a corporate talent and learning team, the transformative tech for me is what helps me transform my organization. And those are the bets that I would make in order to prepare my organization for the future, right? And so that's the filter that I sometimes apply to make sure that we are orienting ourselves. I also love what Liz said about how are users picking it up, right? And that gives us a little bit of a window into the future to say, this looks like something that could be useful or something that could be popular, but how are people engaging with it? And I think Brian, rightly pointed out that they may pick it up, but they'll also move away quite quickly. And that's also another indicator in terms of how's their life cycle progressing. Is it too quick? Is it, sustaining? And those are some of the clues to kind of start to differentiate between what's here to stay, what's truly impactful, useful, versus what may be something that catches your attention, but also moves on quite quickly.
Thank you. And perhaps to extrapolate that a little bit, one thing I have learned from our conversations, Liz and Manasi, about Expedia is just how much you're putting the user at the center of all things for design, around travel design. It's one thing I've experienced as well when I've used the platform, and Microsoft as well. It's all about the user. It's all about that experience. And as you say, and actually on our pre-event alignment call just last week, someone said it's Copilot. It's not autopilot. It's there to support us, but really the user is still at the center. And so it's how am I getting to my goals quicker? How can I focus on high value tasks? And, if it's a fad that helps me get there, or as you say, if it's something that is here to stay, it's just a really exciting time to be not just in the tech space, but just in the space at all. And I'm always learning about new technologies all around the house that can help me. And I'm really excited to build on these discussions. In August, we'll also be joined by Brian, your colleague and also fellow iVentiv advisory board member Karen Coker as our event chair, who is the leads future of work and workforce of the future at Microsoft. So we'll also be able to share some insights on just how much this is changing, and Liz and Manasi as well, who'll be with us along with your colleagues to share the business perspective from Expedia. So we're really excited to be in your space. But thank you all for joining. I'm very excited for how these conversations have panned out and to build on these further next month. And thank you for your time.